In Twilights of Dew and Fire, written by Jezebel Rising, read for you by Entity Stereo. "Well, hello, stranger," said a voice from above their heads. "You've been by at least 3 times. Having a problem finding your way?" Thorin whirled, blade half out of his scabbard, but no one was there. Around him his company, those brave few who would join with him on his quest to retake their home, all were nervous, on edge, their weapons gripped tight. "Such strangers, with such strange tools! I don't think you can plow a field with that just yet." Thorin spun, pulling his blade, to find himself on his rear in the dust, staring up at a lass with golden curls tied up with white ribbon. "That's not very nice." She wagged a finger at him. Thorin could do naught but stare. Where had she come from? "You've not learned your manners, I see." Excuse us, lass," Balin said, stepping forward and blocking Thorin's view of the woman. "Person? Hobbit?" He wasn't sure. "We're looking for Belladonna Took, once Baggins, no longer living at Bag End since her terrible divorce from old Bungo and his clan. Yes, I've heard." Thorin got to his feet, staring over Balin's head at the hobbit lass. Once she was no longer backlit from the sun, he could see the curve of her cheek, the slope of her nose, the curl of her mouth. Balin cleared his throat. "Well, yes, we are looking for Mrs. Baggins. Took, dear, are you hard of hearing?" Balin cleared his throat noisily. "It is our custom to refer to ladies who have been wed by their married names. And it is custom in the Shire to learn our ways before you trample all over things you really shouldn't." She smiled at them. Thorin felt the distinct urge to draw his sword. "Her name is Belladonna Took, and she isn't accepting visitors." Tha-Kun said. "Who, dear?" Thorin stepped forward before Balin could pull his beard out. "His name is Tha-Kun, in the language of my people. I believe he is called Gandalf in Westron." "Oh!" She drew out the word. "The disturber of the peace. How embarrassing for you." "I beg your pardon. You may have it." Her smile never dimmed. "Now, as I said before, do you need help leaving our lands? You've been going about in a circle for half the morning." "What we need is to speak to Belladonna Baggin. Took, dear, are you a little slow?" Thorin growled. Her smile grew. "It is imperative that we speak with Mrs. Baggins." And Thorin fell flat on his rear. Again. Dust rose up all around them. He could hear his men cry out, his boys. Then, "Learn your manners, dear. Toodaloo!" Thorin scrambled to his feet, only to find himself at the border gate of the Shire, a place they had passed by at dawn, none the wiser as to how they had got there. What in the name of Mahal's hammer is going on here? By the 4th time, they had circled around some pub that proclaimed itself the Green Dragon, with no entry in sight, despite how both Dwalin and Nori went looking. Thorin was ready to start setting things on fire. Bad enough that they had been delayed by a week trying to find this burglar for their quest, but said burglar was a lass by all accounts, a shrew of unparalleled might by some, a sad little thing by others, and divorced on top of it all. Thorin wanted to call it quits and try their luck with their poor numbers alone. Tha-Kun wouldn't hear of it, said he would refuse to give his aid unless this divorcee was allowed to come with them. Dwalin agreed that they should just leave her here. Divorce was all but unheard of in their culture. Oaths taken had to be fulfilled. It was their way. But hobbit ways, as they were finding out, were strange, as was their land. No matter what waystones they set up, no matter what mark they made on the fences, by the time they came back, all signs were gone, stones scattered, fence untouched, even with their own horses standing by the same post they had carved their runes in. "Old Maggot doesn't much like you at the moment," said that damnable voice. Now see here, woman. Talk like that gets a body divorced here in the Shire. Still without your manners, I see. The lass was dressed in pinks and yellows today. A white ribbon still bound up her hair. Ma'am? Excuse me, said Ori, of all people. Thorin was too busy trying not to draw blood in this fair green field. Tharkun had said he would damn their quest from getting past even that damned elven city if they so much as nicked a single hobbit. For my notes. He held up a battered journal. May I ask, what are manners? She tilted her head, her golden hair glinting in the sun. Manners are manners, my boy. Surely you were taught them? I have learned the manners of my people, Ori said, shifting foot to foot. I'm starting to think that our manners and yours are rather different. I see. She rocked up onto her toes. Well, our manners say that to enter a place without leave means you'll be shown right out before the sun sets. How has that been going for you? Thorin growled, fingers curling into a tight fist. So that was how they kept ending up at that damn gate every day. Now see here. Manners! She sang out as the very earth beneath them fell away, and Thorin was then sitting up, spitting out dust to see that damn gate standing in the green field, mocking them as her damnable laugh faded into silence. Easy, lad. Balin put a hand to his arm. Thorin realized he was shaking with rage. I've a thought. We can try it in the morning. But the days! We've all heard what Tharkun has said. We all know the stones told us we must have this lass join our company. Balin looked pained to say it. Come, in the morning we'll try my idea. Thorin gave the gate a baleful glare as they turned to make their way back to their campsite. Surely this was too much to ask. Surely the stones were wrong? But even thinking the thought made Thorin make a subtle warding sign and duck his head. Mahal was never wrong. If the stones said they needed this divorcee, then fine. They would deal with these damnable hobbits. This damnable tricky shire. Get the oath needed from the burglar and be on their way. The next day, Balin took the lead, stepping up to the gate and stopping, one hand stroking his beard. Excuse me, Balin said into thin air. I was wondering if our company may have leave to enter the Shire? Silence met his words. The wind whistled across the grasses, making a low sush-shush sound. Dawn was fading. The puffy clouds in the east were losing their fiery tinge, going a pale orange that faded into white as they stood before the gate. Thorin felt his jaw flex, a twinge of pain spiking near his eye. This was ridiculous. Well, not quite the proper manners, but good enough, I suppose. Said the same damn lass that had been bothering them the entire time. Then Thorin had to blink because that same lass stepped out from behind a post no bigger than his arm and gave them a brilliant smile. For a moment it felt like someone had taken a hammer to Thorin's chest. Then she dipped into a brief curtsy and clasped her hands behind her back. I bid you welcome to the Shire. By word of the Thane, you are given 3 days to find what you seek, then no more may you return. That is all the grace that I can give you. 3 days? Thorin pushed forward. Woman, we have been attempting to find this. Her eyebrow went up. Balin stepped on his foot. This mistook for a week. How in the world are we to find her in 3 days? Better. She clicked her tongue at him. But you've a nasty temper. You have heard Miss Took is divorced, haven't you? Aye, Dwalin said. A right harpy she was called. An ill omen by a farmer we passed. A lady near the bridge called her a tramp. Her grin grew with each word. Thorin felt a prickle move down his spine. My, isn't that interesting? She can't even keep a husband. Nori scoffed. Not sure how that makes her interesting. And yet you're still here. It has been foretold, Thorin said. There went that eyebrow again. Foretold, was it? By whom, may I ask? You may not. Thorin drew himself up, feeling his company bristle beside him. My, she said, softer. Thorin couldn't make out just what that look meant. Manners and manners, I suppose. Then she gave herself a shake and tipped her chin up to meet Thorin's stare for stare. Her name is Miss Took. That's quite a lot of help I gave you on your very first day. Now put that to use, why don't you? Yes, we. Thorin snapped his mouth shut when she spun on her heel and just disappeared. Gone. As if she'd vanished into thin air. Impossible. For 3 days they searched. Each time they found a gate, they made Balin ask permission to enter. And each time a hobbit would pop out of somewhere and answer them. Most times they were told to get off the grass. Once a hobbit lady shook her umbrella at them and called them tramps. Thorin had to hold Dwalin back, even as the hobbit lass flicked the ends of her curls at them and flounced off into thin air, just like all the rest of the hobbits. It wasn't until the sun began to set on the 3rd day that they found their way to a place called the Great Smiles, whatever those were. A door large enough that even Gandalf could have stepped inside without ducking his head held a strange curved knot of metal that made Thorin's hand ache when he touched it. The knocker struck like a gong, making all of them wince and pull back. One by one, they watched the lights go out in the hill until all was black and silent, the very windows seeming to fade away and become branch and grass and hill and thorn. The darkness seemed to grow. Thorin wanted more than anything to reach for his sword. Still, as the leader of his company, as a would-be king, he stepped forward and said, "My name is Thorin Oakenshield. He had to stop and take a deep breath in. I ask to see one Belladonna Took. He winced as Balin's foot came in contact with his ankle. Please. The last of the light guttered out as the sun slipped behind a cloud gathered on the horizon. A cold wind blew. Thorin felt his skin prickle as he realized the tiny cracking sounds around them belied movement as someone or something encircled them. Then the door slammed open, blinding them with light. One by one the windows lit. Thorin could hear the sound of laughter and cheer. The heady scent of fresh-baked bread spilled out into the air. Well done, Mr. Oakenshield. That same damn lass stood on the other side of the door, beaming at them. You've passed your first test. Do come in. Dinner's waiting. We do not have time, Mr. Oakenshield. She wagged her finger. You just passed your first test. Are you so eager to start again? Thorin shut his mouth and felt his teeth grind together. No, he winced. Balin beamed at the lass. Thank you. Then please come in. Mind your shoes, she said with a laugh. I have been told it is rude to ask a person of your race to take off your shoes when entering a house. We've laid down rugs to guide you instead. Guide us. What do you... This way! She turned with a swirl of skirts and was gone. This place is very strange, Keeley said. Not so sure if I like it. Just now you're coming to that conclusion, said Feely. Come on then, you first. No, you first. Keeley. Enough, Thorin said. I will go first. Be on your guard. And mind your manners, Balin added, even as Thorin put one hesitant foot over the threshold. They followed the runners through a strangely curved hall. It made Thorin's eyes want to cross. The hall seemed too big, then too small, but when he kept his eyes on the rugs running down the center of the floor, The walls moved back into a normal-sized shape, and the ceiling did not slope like it was about to brain him. By the time they made it to a room that opened up wide, taller than twice Tharkun's height, and wide as the holy vault in Mahal's forge, Thorin could feel a hand curled into the back of his tunic, and a quick glance back told him that his entire company was connected to one another by one hand.
Mr. Oakenshield! My, we never thought we'd see the day.
A genial male voice said from his side. Thorin twitched, one hand brushing the hilt of his sword, but turned to find a rather round hobbit standing next to him, where there had been nothing but a wall, but was now some sort of corner? Thorin blinked, a headache spiking, as he glimpsed a wall of dirt, then a polished wooden wall, then what looked like a study, then an old burrow full of bones.
Look out! Thorin heard a faint voice cry out as the world spun about him and darkness rose to meet him.
Thorin woke to find himself in a snug bed with a thick quilt pulled up to his chin. He had been stripped of his armor and most of his clothes. He felt weak as a kitten. There was a quiet click, and the door to his room opened. He turned his head to see that damnable lass step inside on silent feet, balancing a tray on one hand. He said nothing as she bustled about, setting the tray next to his bed and moving over to draw back the curtains to let in light. "It's good to see you awake," she said without turning. The curtains were tied back with white ribbons. "You're the last of your company to wake. No wonder with all that nonsense in your head." "What?" Thorin felt perfectly justified in his testy tone. "Is going on?" At that she turned, and her smile this time was small and kind. "Do you know why Gandalf sent you to us?" Thorin blinked at her. "Because our stones said that our company needed one more member, and that member would be named by Tharkun, and only that member would be blessed to lead us to victory." That was not what he meant to say. Thorin snapped his mouth shut, mortified. I mean to say, we don't call them stones." She came close and then sat on his bed. Whatever in the world was going on? "We call them the Star Strings. We knew you were coming. Gandalf didn't even have to say, but he, at least, had manners enough to ask our opinion about it."
"I have no idea what is going on,"
Thorin told her. Her smile never faltered. "It is said that long ago we walked out of a tower that was once our home." She leaned forward, quick hands fussing at the edge of his quilt. "We learned our paths then, and some say that's where we learned dark from light. Bit dodgy, honestly, since it's all just stories told from one generation to the next, but here we are. Anyway, one thing we did walk away with is a certain ability to sense things, if you catch my meaning." Thorin stared. "No," he said. "I do not." She laughed, and the sound cracked through him like a bell. "Different is as different does, as my gran would have said." Her mirth passed, and her smile still stayed warm and kind. "Did you know that you carried a terrible darkness in you? That all of you did?" Thorin shook his head. "We do not. We are dwarves of Erebor. We are strong in our faith to Mahal. We would never betray it." At that her smile did falter. "I do not question your faith," she said softly. "Long ago a darkness was created. Long ago that darkness spread. Long ago that darkness tried to encircle all the races of Arda. They just didn't plan on us." She held up a finger. "Nor did they figure
that we would be the best at sniffing out that darkness and casting it aside. It's what we do. You are hobbits of the Shire. You are farmers, herders, gentlefolk. Thorin squinted at her. Aren't you? She tilted her head, one finger coming up to tap at her lips. Gentlefolk, yes. The rest, well, that's complicated. That made absolutely no sense. Thorin could not stop staring at that finger pressed to her bottom lip. Shall I show you? Show me what? Her fingers flashed, and there was a bright ting of metal ringing. Then Thorin saw something gold tumble through the air to land on the palm of her hand. He stared. There, on a soft palm, sat one of the dwarven rings. Thorin would know them anywhere. All his line would. The carvings felt as though they were etched into his bones. Where did you get that? He wanted to touch it. He wanted to see if it was real. Her soft hand took his and pressed that gold ring into his hand. It was never mine to keep, she told him. The words felt like a promise he could not understand. Just to carry for a short while. I give it back to you with joy and the knowledge that it will never lead you into darkness again. Thorin stared down at the ring, a fine tremor causing his hand to shake. The gold sickness, he said, his throat tight with something he could not name. That is what you meant. Were we stricken with it? He felt horror slink down his spine. Have we hurt anyone? Be at peace, Mr. Oakenshield. You have harmed none but yourself. It's good Gandalf got you here when he did. Otherwise, you'd be in a right mess. She patted his hand and stood, fluffing her skirts and then pushing the tray of food onto his lap. Now, be a dear and eat up. There's fresh clothes in the washroom for you when you're ready. No boots, she added with a wink as she opened the door. Sorry, not sorry, but for now you'll have to abide by our manners, just to make sure. Since none of that made any sense whatsoever, Thorin focused on eating and then hunting down the clothes he was promised. A search of the room netted him none of his armor, nor his weapons. Still, he was mostly at ease when he left the room, the hall no longer twisting around him as he followed the sound of his company's laughter deeper into the maze of hallways of this strange burrow. There he saw Dwalin, red as a beet, as a hobbit lass half his size stood over his chair, with a wooden spoon pointed at him and a wicked smile on her mouth. Dori was surrounded by hobbit lasses as well, but both he and the lasses had papers scattered about them, and Thorin could have sworn they were talking about scones. Ori was listening to an older hobbit by the fire, curls gone white and thin, the flyaway hair touched by gold from the fire burning in the hearth. Balin and Bofur were sitting by a window, smoking pipes that had green smoke curling up from the bowl. Bifur was surrounded by children, all of them playing some sort of complicated game. Nori was nowhere to be seen, but then Thorin spotted his once thief being chased from what could only be the kitchen, a piping hot scone juggled from hand to hand as he ran. Fili and Kili were stretched out on the rug by Ori, both of them seemingly asleep. Only Glowin and Owen were sitting at one of the long tables, both of them tucking into a very large breakfast. There, that's much better. That same round hobbit was back, appearing at Thorin's side from thin air. Thorin wasn't sure why that didn't bother him so much anymore. Always behaving themselves for you this time? Thorin resisted the urge to scrape a bare foot over the thick rug under his toes. It felt positively indecent to stand there without boots on, for everyone to see. Yes, he cleared his throat. Thank you for your hospitality. Nonsense, it was our duty. Now, as you've not a clue as to who I am, I will introduce myself. I am the Thane of the Shire, Gerontius Took you may call me, and I hear you are one Thorin Oakenshield. His eyes gleamed, heir and would-be king of Erebor. At your service, Thorin said without thinking, bowing to the Thane. Well met. Much better manners. The Thane smiled, clapping his hands. Why, this day is getting better and better. Uncle! The boys were up, charging over to knock Thorin off his feet and onto a thick rug. It should have hurt. Instead, he wrestled his boys to the ground, laughing as they did, until the cries of "Mercy, mercy" rang out, and Thorin let them go. By the time he sat up, realizing that he had not finished his conversation with this Thane, a leader of some sort Balin had told them while they were wandering the paths outside, Thorin realized that more hobbits had entered the hall and food was being served. Thorin had had feasts in Erebor. They had been served the finest of dishes, the rarest of foods, as the might of their kingdom grew and grew. The food on the table in front of him put all others to shame. Thorin couldn't help but tuck in, even as the rest of his company made short work of their meals too. Now, said the Thane, when the last of the dishes had been cleared away, songs sung as the wash was done, and the chairs moved into a loose circle about the fire. I hear you've come to take my daughter away. Thorin sputtered. Sir, he began. The Thane laughed, one hand slapping his knee. You should see your faces. My, what a sight. He wiped at his eyes, still chuckling. The Gandalf was here. The Thane wrinkled his nose at them, even as a hiss rose from the side of their circle where nothing was. Yes, yes, I know, Gandalf. The Thane gave the thin air a pointed look. Thorin felt a prickle move down his spine. Came to tell us that an adventure had come to us, to my belladonna to be exact. That this adventure had to be answered. There his mirth faded as he looked into the fire. The star-strings said as much. So did the earth. It was not what we expected. He shook his head. Quite the mess it made. Sir, Thorin shared a glance with Balin. It was not our intention to cause any of your family harm. Harm? Ah, lad, no harm done. Just a different adventure than what we'd thought our belladonna would have. The Thane took out his pipe and lit it with a tapper, passing it to Balin, even as the lit end did not smoke nor smolder, but simply glowed red without burning the thin wood. Now, let's see that contract, shall we? The Thane took the roll of paper Balin produced and read it through. He made some soft sounds, pipe tapping at his lips as he read. Well, I can see how this would have caused a spot of trouble on the road. Such legalese! He snorted and then snapped the contract open, making it stiff as a board, hanging in the air. There will have to be some changes, no doubt. One of ours can't be bound with some of those oaths. It's not our way. Thorin eyed the floating paper, even as he saw Dwalin sit up straighter across from him. His feet felt cold and bare on the floor. It is our way, he began, but not yours, as I am learning. We guard our secrets and our quest with such oaths. Is there a hobbit way we can have our 14th member pledge and promise themselves to our same quest? The Thane puffed at his pipe, the thin swirls of blue smoke curling about him. The fire crackled on the hearth. "A pledge and a promise," he murmured. "What a choice of words." "Sir?" "Very well." The Thane took the pipe out of his mouth with a sigh. "Belladonna, come forward. I see now what you meant." Bright laughter met his words. Thorin watched as that self-same damnable lass appeared at the edge of the circle, skirts swirling, hair done up in blue ribbons this time, her dress as white as snow. "I've the flowers." She leaned down to kiss her father's cheek. "You've the words. Shall we, O father of mine?" "We shall," he said, and stood. "Come, Thorin Oakenshield. A promise and a pledge. That is what you'll get." And that was how one Thorin Oakenshield found himself crowned with flowers, standing hand in hand with that same hobbit lass that had vexed him so. He could not stop staring at her mouth. "By word and deed, I shall follow thee," she said, smiling up at him. "By stone and earth, I shall be your home." The words came to him. Thorin had no idea how. They both signed a much longer contract, some of it glittering gold in places where changes were made. Cheers went up, corks were popped. Thorin had no idea what was happening. By the time the dancing started, everyone had at least 3 mugs of strong ale, and the scent of flowers was thick in his throat. When he woke the next morning, tucked into bed, that lass curled against his side, Thorin Oakenshield had a rather sneaking suspicion that he had 1. Been bamboozled into marriage, and 2. That he didn't mind one bit. Later, much later, after a quest and a dragon, and a disappearing wife with a temper that matched said dragon, Thorin finally got an answer to a particular question of his from Belladonna. "Bungo? Oh, my darling, we thought my adventure was to marry into that clan." Her pert nose wrinkled. "But do not fuss so. It was a fleeting thing, and the Baggins were, well," she sighed, "definitely not the adventure I was meant to have. Perhaps in another life." A shadow moved across her face. Thorin had learned well enough not to pursue that. Not if he didn't want to duck the contents of half the treasury thrown at his head. "Come now, let's see off our guests and get to work. You did promise me a home. I'll write to father if you don't hop to it." "I'm going." "And be nice to Thranduil." "I will not," Thorin sputtered. His wife put her hands on her hips. Her foot began to tap. "He is ridiculous." The foot tapped faster. Thorin pressed his lips together. One of her eyebrows went up. "Thorin!" hissed Dwalin from the hall. "The coward!" "Thorin!" He glanced back at his wife and winced, head ducking as his shoulders came up about his ears. "I won't yell, Thorin," she said. "He let his moose into our front hall." That made her pause. The foot stopped tapping. She pursed her lips. "Do not kick him, and only give him the red chest." She turned and flounced back down the hall. "And tell Gandalf he owes me a new pipe." "Yes, dear," Thorin called after her. He would rather carve her a new pipe himself. Still, since she had killed a dragon with nothing more than her pipe and a handful of gold coins, well, she could ask for anything she wanted. He would fetch it for her. "Thranduil took the moose out the second he knew she were in the mountain," Dwalin muttered at him as they made their way to the entrance hall. "You know she'll hear of it." "He still brought it in. Deed was done, no matter the timing." "You," Dwalin said with a snort, "are getting too much like her. At least it'll make the Leaf Eaters mad." Thorin felt nothing but satisfaction as he tripped Dwalin with his own laces and stepped away, the flow of the earth and slide of stone telling him where to go. "Thranduil," he said, enjoying the way the Elven King flinched so hard it sent his fancy wine spilling down the front of his tunic. "My wife wants you out of our hall. Take this and make sure your moose doesn't set foot in here ever again." Watching the Elven King tumble rear over tea kettle was even better when Thorin chucked that red chest at his face. As it turned out, becoming a hobbit by marriage wasn't a terrible thing. Billadunatook, once Baggins. I started reading without looking at the words I was reading. That's not very smart. What in the name of Mahal's hammer is going on here? Nothing out of the mundane, Thorin, I assure you. Oaths taken had to be Why do I keep trying to say befilled? That's not a word! Thorin felt his jaw flex. A twinge of spite. A twinge of spike. 3 days? Thorin pushed forward. "Women, we have been attempting to find this." Her elbow went up. Her elbow? That's an eyebrow. A door large enough that even Gandalf could have stepped. A door large enough that even Gandalf could have stepped. A door large enough that even Gandalf could have stepped inside without ducking his head felt a strange curved knot of metal that made Thorin's ache. Thorin's ache? Thorin's ache? What is aching, Thorin? Do you ache just in general? The knucker stuck like a prong. The knucker? What the heck is the knucker? The heady scent of fresh-baked bread slipped out into the air. Spilled. Why did I say slipped? Smell doesn't slip. Dory was surrounded by hobbit lasses as well, but both he and the losses. What? I'm not Irish. Why am I saying losses? Feely and Keely were stretched out on the rug by Orly. By Orly? What? Who's Orly? There. That's much better. The Gandalf was here. The Thane wrinkled his noise. Noise? Who wrinkles noise? Well, I guess that is what I'm doing. I'm wrinkling noise here. He let his moose into our front hall. That's an elk, not a moose. In Twilights of Dew and Fire. Read for you by Entity Stereo. Written by Jezebel Rising. I said that out of order. Hello everyone. Welcome to the end of the video. An important note before you leave. If you've liked the story, then please go tell Jezebel Rising what you thought about it on AO3. Both the story and author will be linked below. If you liked my reading of the story and the video in general, please consider leaving a like, subscribing if you want, and telling me your thoughts in the comments below. Many thanks to Jezebel Rising for 1, writing something so heartfelt and funny, and 2, for letting me record their story and upload it to my channel. Sorry it took me over 4 months to actually do it. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Farewell.